My name is Sarah, and at 45, I've learned a thing or two about life in the Rust Belt of Ohio. I work as a medical assistant at a local clinic, a job that's demanding but rewarding in its own way. It pays the bills, puts food on the table for me and my Emily, who's 16 and going through that delightful phase where everything I say is apparently grounds for an eye roll. We live in a modest little house with a yard just big enough for Emily to practice her soccer kicks. And honestly, most days, life feels manageable. But if there's one constant in my life that consistently throws a wrench in that manageability, it's my younger brother, Mark. He's got that effortless charm, the kind that makes people instantly like him, the kind that always seemed to get him out of scrapes. He's 2 years younger than me, and while I was always the one with my nose in a book, diligently saving my allowance, Mark was out there living life, often on credit or, let's be honest, on my dime. I've always felt this responsibility towards him. Maybe it's because Mom always seemed to favor him, maybe it's just my nature. Whatever the reason, over the years, I've bailed Mark out more times than I can count. A missed rent payment here, a hefty credit card bill there, even a few times when his car decided to take an unscheduled vacation to the repair shop. Each time, he'd promise it was the last time, his eyes wide with sincerity, and I'd believe him, or at least I'd want to. The biggest one, the one that still makes my stomach clench when I think about it, was a few years back when he wanted to start his own little landscaping business. He needed a truck, and his credit was, shall we say, less than stellar. Mom couldn't co-sign. She said her own finances were too tight, though she never seemed to have trouble buying Mark expensive gifts. So, being the ever-reliable big sister I did, felt like a huge leap of faith, a real commitment. He swore he'd make the payments on time, that this was his chance to finally get his life on track. Thanksgiving last year, it felt like things were finally looking up. Emily and I drove the hour to Mom's house, the car packed with my famous pumpkin pie and a casserole dish overflowing with green bean casserole. The house was warm and filled with the familiar smells of turkey and cinnamon. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, her usual slightly frazzled but happy self. Mark was there too, looking uncharacteristically put together in a new sweater. As we sat down to eat, I noticed the watch on Mark's wrist. It was one of those fancy smartwatches, the kind that probably cost more than my last car repair. I smiled, genuinely happy for him if he was doing well. But a little seed of unease planted itself in my gut. I'd been putting off getting new tires for my car, trying to stretch the budget until after the holidays. Throughout dinner, Mom's attention was, as usual, mostly focused on Mark. She peppered him with questions about his work. He'd somehow landed a sales job at a car dealership, praising his ambition and his go-getter attitude. Emily and I exchanged a knowing glance. It wasn't that Mom didn't love us, but Mark was always the star, the one who needed the most encouragement, the most help. Later that evening, as I was helping Mom clear the dishes, she casually mentioned how proud she was of Mark for finally getting ahead. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I wanted to be happy for him, I really did, but a nagging feeling kept whispering in the back of my mind. Something felt off. Maybe it was the expensive watch, maybe it was the way he avoided my gaze when I asked about his new job. Or maybe, deep down, I just knew that with Mark, things were rarely ever as good as they seemed. The Tuesday after Thanksgiving, the phone rang while I was making Emily's lunch. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. "Hello, this is Sarah Miller?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, speaking. Ms. Miller, my name is David Chun, and I'm calling from First National Bank regarding a loan in your name." My stomach did a little flip. I hadn't taken out any new loans. "I think you might have the wrong number," I said, a knot tightening in my chest. "The loan was co-signed by you for a Mark Miller," Mr. Chun continued, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Mark, the truck loan. It had been a few years, and he'd been making the payments, or so I thought. "There appears to be a significant overdue balance, Ms. Miller. Several payments have been missed, and we've been unable to reach Mr. Miller." Panic clawed at my throat. "But he was supposed to be making those payments," I stammered, my hands starting to tremble. "That was the agreement." Mr. Chen's voice remained calm but firm. "As a co-signer, Ms. Miller, you are equally responsible for the debt. We need to arrange for immediate payment to avoid further action. He went on to explain the outstanding amount, a figure that made my head spin, over $8,000. I hung up the phone, my legs feeling like jelly. I tried calling Mark immediately, my fingers fumbling with my phone. It rang and rang, going straight to voicemail each time. I sent him a frantic text. Mark, call me now. The bank just called about the truck loan. What's going on? Hours crawled by, each one amplifying my anxiety. I called him again and again, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Still nothing. That evening, I did what any modern person would do in a state of panic. I scrolled through Mark's social media, and that's when the knot in my stomach twisted into a painful, sickening knot. His feed was a highlight reel of expensive dinners, nights out with friends, and pictures of him proudly showing off a brand new motorcycle. There was no mention of financial troubles, no hint of him struggling to make loan payments. It was like he was living a carefree life, completely oblivious to the mess he'd created. Or, more likely, completely unconcerned about the mess I was now in. A few days later, I finally managed to get a hold of Mom. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. The overdue loan, Mark's unresponsiveness. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mom sighed. "Oh, Sarah," she said, her tone laced with a familiar blend of exasperation and indulgence. "You know how Mark is. He probably just got a little behind. He'll catch up." "Mom, it's thousands of dollars. The bank is threatening legal action against me," I exclaimed, my voice rising in desperation. "He's bought a new motorcycle. How could he be behind on loan payments if he can afford that?" Another sigh. "Well, Sarah, he works hard. He probably just wanted to treat himself. He deserves a little fun." Her words hit me like a physical blow. So, he deserves fun. But I deserve to be financially ruined because he can't be responsible? The unfairness of it all, the blatant favoritism, it was like a punch to the gut. Mom's tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. I'm sure it's not that bad. Just give him some time." I ended the call feeling more frustrated and alone than ever. Mom wasn't going to help. She never did when it came to holding Mark accountable. A few more days of unanswered calls and increasingly threatening letters from the bank passed. Finally, late one evening, my phone rang, and Mark's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated for a moment, a mix of anger and a sliver of hope churning within me, before answering. "Mark," I said, my voice tight. There was a brief pause, and then his familiar, easygoing voice filled my ear. "Hey, Sarah. What's up?" He sounded completely unbothered, like I was calling to chat about the weather. "What's up, Mark? The bank is threatening to sue me because you haven't paid the truck loan. Do you have any idea the stress this is causing me?" There was a beat of silence, and then he chuckled, a short, dismissive sound that sent a shiver of cold fury down my spine. "Oh, that. Yeah. Things have been a little tight lately." "Tight? Mark, you just bought a motorcycle." I practically yelled into the phone. "Look, Sarah," he said, his tone suddenly hardening, the charm evaporating. "That's my business. And frankly, your debt is your problem now. You're the one who signed the papers." And then he hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a stark, empty sound that echoed the hollowness that had suddenly opened up inside me. Mark's words echoed in my head, cold and dismissive. "Your debt is your problem now." For a long moment, I just stared at my phone, the screen dark and lifeless. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a crushing weight of despair. Years of being the reliable one, the giver, the one who always picked up the pieces. And this was my reward? A callous betrayal and a mountain of debt that wasn't even mine in the first place. Tears welled up, hot and angry. I sank onto the edge of the couch, the weight of it all pressing down on me. $8,000. That was nearly 3 months of my salary. Money I'd been carefully saving for Emily's college fund and those much-needed car repairs. How could he be so selfish? How could he treat me like this? But as the initial shock began to recede, something else started to bubble up inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was a fierce, unwavering resolve. I looked around my small living room, at the framed photos of Emily and me, at the worn-out soccer ball in the corner. I thought about all the late shifts I'd worked, the sacrifices I'd made to give Emily a good life. And then I pictured Mark, carefree on his new motorcycle, laughing off the financial ruin he was about to inflict on me. No, just no. I wouldn't let him do this. I wouldn't let him and Mom continue to treat me like a doormat. This had to stop. Right here, right now. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier now, a newfound determination hardening my gaze. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for lawyers in my area who specialized in debt and cosigner issues. After reading a few reviews, I found a local attorney named Ms. Evans and sent her an email outlining my situation. The next morning, I called her office and scheduled a consultation. Talking to Ms. Evans was like a breath of fresh air. She listened patiently as I recounted the years of financial support, the co-signed loan, and Mark's blatant disregard for his responsibilities. She explained my options, the potential legal costs, and the likelihood of success in separating myself from the loan. It wouldn't be easy, she cautioned, and it would likely involve some immediate financial pain. But in the long run, it was the best way to protect myself. As I left her office, a weight had lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I knew this would be a tough road, but I was finally taking steps to protect myself, to prioritize my own well-being and Emily's future. Back home, I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Mark's contact information for a moment. Part of me wanted to unleash a torrent of anger, to make him understand the hurt and betrayal I felt. But another part of me, the part that was finally starting to value my own peace, knew that any attempt at reasoning with him would be futile. He had shown his true colors, and I didn't need to waste any more energy on him. Instead, I opened a new text message and typed out 3 simple words: "Enjoy the silence." Then, with a deep breath, I pressed send. Felt surprisingly liberating. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, no yelling or accusations, just a quiet declaration that I was done. Next, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Mom's number. Her calls had already started. A barrage of guilt-tripping messages about how I should be more understanding of Mark's situation, how he was family. With a heavy heart, but with a firm resolve, I blocked her number too. For the first time in my adult life, I was creating a boundary, a wall between myself and the people who had consistently taken me for granted. The silence that followed on my phone felt profound, a stark contrast to the years of constant demands and emotional manipulation. The immediate aftermath of my decision was strange. My phone, usually buzzing with notifications, was eerily quiet. Mark left a string of angry voicemails over the next few days, ranting about how I was being selfish and unfair, how I was ruining his life. I didn't listen to them. Each time my phone indicated a new message from him, I simply deleted it. Mom's emails started a few days later. They were a roller coaster of emotions, starting with disbelief and anger, accusing me of turning my back on my own brother. Then came the guilt trips, reminding me of all the sacrifices she had supposedly made for me over the years. Finally, the tone shifted to desperate pleas, begging me to reconsider, to talk to Mark, to not let money ruin our family. I read them, each word a familiar stab, but I didn't reply. The silence from them was deafening, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't constantly worrying about Mark's latest crisis or feeling obligated to smooth things over with Mom. I focused on Emily, on work, on the small joys of everyday life. Of course, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the house was quiet, a pang of guilt would sometimes hit me. Was I being too harsh? Was I abandoning my family in their time of need? But then I would remember Mark's callous laughter on the phone, Mom's unwavering support of him despite his irresponsibility, and the image of Emily's hopeful face. No, I told myself, I was doing what I had to do. I leaned on my best friend, Lisa, ironically, not that Lisa from Mark's life, who had always been a steady source of support and good advice. She listened patiently as I poured out my heart, offering words of encouragement and reminding me that I deserved to be treated with respect. Emily, too, sensed a shift in the atmosphere. While I hadn't gone into all the financial details, She knew something was wrong with Uncle Mark. She offered me extra hugs and even did the dishes without being asked. A sure sign she knew I was stressed. As the weeks went by, I started to see things more clearly. I realized that my role as the dependable one had become a crutch for Mark and a way for Mom to avoid confronting his behavior. I had spent so many years trying to earn my mother's approval by fixing Mark's problems, by being the responsible counterpoint to his recklessness. But in the process, I had neglected my own needs, my own dreams, and even Emily's well-being. The silence from Mark and Mom, while initially unsettling, became a space for me to breathe, to reflect on my own life and what I truly wanted. I started to understand that sometimes love doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to set boundaries, even if it means creating distance. The guilt slowly started to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of empowerment. I was finally taking control of my own life, and it felt good. Months drifted by, each one bringing a sense of quiet progress. The legal process of separating myself from Mark's loan was arduous, involving paperwork and meetings, but Ms. Evans was a rock. There was a financial hit, as expected, but I tightened my belt, picked up an extra shift at the clinic, and managed to stay afloat. To my surprise, a few months later, I was offered a promotion to a lead medical assistant position, a role with better pay and more responsibility, something I might not have even considered if I hadn't been forced to reevaluate my financial situation. The silence from Mark and Mom continued, punctuated only by the occasional email from Mom, which I mostly skimmed before archiving. There were no grand apologies, no sudden realizations on their part. It was a stark, quiet severing of ties, and while a part of me still felt a pang of sadness for what could have been, the overwhelming feeling was one of relief. Thanksgiving rolled around again, and this year felt different. There was no long drive to Mom's, no forced smiles or underlying tension. Emily and I decided to create our own traditions. We slept in late, went to a local diner for a hearty breakfast, and then spent the afternoon watching cheesy holiday movies in our pajamas. In the evening, we ordered takeout from our favorite Thai place, something Mom would have never approved of. It was simple, it was quiet, and it was filled with a genuine warmth and connection that had often been missing from the larger family gatherings. As we sat on the couch, Emily's head resting on my shoulder, I realized how much lighter I felt. I wasn't carrying the weight of Mark's irresponsibility or the emotional baggage of Mom's favoritism. I was simply Sarah, a mother enjoying a peaceful holiday with her daughter. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me a harsh but valuable lesson. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. And sometimes the bravest and most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for your own well-being and future, is to walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with family. It's not easy. There will be guilt, there will be loneliness, and there will be moments when you question your decision. But in the end, prioritizing your own peace and setting healthy boundaries is essential for your own survival and happiness. If you've ever had to make a tough decision like this for your own peace, or if you've experienced similar family dynamics, I encourage you to share your story in the comments below. Your experiences can help others who might be going through something similar. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more relatable stories about navigating the complexities of life and relationships.